Shana Tova. In my just over a year here, I've already taught one particular text from Mishnah Yoma countless times on this bima, and this morning, I'll teach it again. Wrongdoings between a person and God, ben adam lamakom, Yom Kippur will atone for those. But wrongdoings between one person and another, ben adam lachavero, Yom Kippur will not atone until one has appeased the other. For the person who performs the wrongdoing towards someone else, the gates of repentance, sharei tshuva, don't even unlock for her until she does the work and makes amends. The victim gets to choose whether or not the wrongdoer's apology is enough to earn access to God's loving kindness and mercy, at least regarding that one deed. The person tasked to forgive holds an incredible amount of power. The great gift and the great burden of deciding whether or not God, God's self, has the right to consider forgiveness and atonement for the one who has wronged her. A friend and colleague, the Reverend David Powers of Memphis, Tennessee, teaches forgiveness as removing the boulder from the mythical Sisyphus. In Greek mythology, Sisyphus is doomed to push a boulder up a mountain for eternity, trying with all of his might, but never succeeding at getting it to progress without it rolling backwards again. When we forgive, according to Powers, we remove the boulder that we are eternally trying to push up the hill. Yes, after we remove the boulder, there will still be a mountain to climb afterwards. Yes, after we forgive, we will still experience the emotional and situational after effects of what was done or said to us, and yet, we will finally be able to move through and perhaps even past those effects in time. And yet, we come from a religious tradition that is decidedly not one that turns the other cheek. As we learned last high holiday season at Nosh and Knowledge a couple weeks ago, and last night for those who were here, we are only required to forgive when our perpetrator has first done everything in her power to right the wrong she has committed, and second, delivered a personal, direct apology. At that point, and only at that point, the medieval scholar Rambam, or Maimonides, teaches that it is, quote, forbidden for a person to be cruel and refuse to be appeased. Even if one aggravated another and wronged her severely, she should not seek revenge or bear a grudge. After 3 rejected appeals for forgiveness, Rambam teaches, the responsibility for the wrongdoing transfers to the victim. If the victim chooses not to forgive, that victim is now, according to Jewish law, responsible for the misdeed. It's no wonder, then, that waiting for the right moment to forgive can feel like carrying the weight of a boulder on a steep hill. Sometimes we sit there with that boulder because the person who has wronged us has not yet taken the necessary steps or apologized. Sometimes we sit there with that boulder because we are not yet ready to cast it aside. Often as we wait to forgive, the hurt or the anger, the frustration that we feel eats up our energy and attention, distracting us from the people and the responsibilities in our lives. When the person against whom we are holding a grudge or from whom we are waiting to hear an apology is someone central to our lives or constantly present, that lack of reconciliation can take up so much of our mental space that we cannot consider any other part of that person, as hard as we try. Over the past few weeks, even up until yesterday, I have heard from several of you who have lamented your inability to forgive. For those of you who have shared and those of you who have not but are lamenting the same, please know that you are not alone. For each of you, what would it take for you to forgive? If it would take that person's apology and repentance and you've not yet spoken to them about what they did or what they said, consider the mitzvah in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 17, Lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha. Do not hate your kinsperson in your heart. Hocheach tochiach et amitecha. You shall surely rebuke your fellow. The person against whom you hold frustration, anger, hurt, maybe even hate, may not know what they did or said wrong. They might not even know that you're hurt at all until you say something. The longer you hold that hatred inside, the longer you let those words and actions consume you, the more volatile your response may become when it finally erupts. When God writes in the Torah, "Hocheach, tochiach, you shall surely rebuke," instead of simply "tocheach, you shall rebuke," the doubling lets us know that even if you thought the words did not need to be said, you know exactly what you did is usually not enough of a rebuke to affect any solution other than confusion or frustration. Rebuke, God commands, even if you think you should not have to. That very same verse ends with a word of caution, "V'lo tisa alav chet," and do not lift wrongdoing upon them. Our ancient and modern commentators tend to hold two different views about the Torah's brief yet puzzling warning. Perhaps God is commanding us not to compel wrongdoers to perform further wrong as a response to our rebuke of them. Perhaps God is commanding us not to do wrong in the act of rebuke. But with either interpretation, if we rebuke with name-calling in public in an insensitive tone or with too harsh a tone, or at the wrong time, we risk doling the same anger and hurt out to the person who hurt us first. In many, if not most situations, forgiveness is not so straightforward. Perhaps regardless of how much the person who hurt you does or says, it will never be enough to fully hurt your pain. In her book, Why Won't You Apologize? Healing Big Betrayals and Everyday Hurts, Dr. Harriet Lerner suggests that a person can forgive, quote, whatever percentage she chooses, or not at all, and that she does not need to give away all her anger to continue the relationship. She refers to a couple who came to her for therapy after the husband had an affair. After his wife confronted him, he immediately ended the affair, committed to telling her the truth in detail, listened when she needed to express her extreme anger, depression, and confusion, read countless books about marriage in the aftermath, and apologized repeatedly. The couple's marriage continued to survive, even to thrive. After a few years had passed, he asked her whether she forgave him. Her answer? 90%. I forgive you for having the affair, but I will never forgive you for the time when you slept with her in our bed while I was out of town. Dr. Lerner's client wielded that power to forgive with a steady, realistic hand. While she acknowledged and respected the efforts and follow-through that her husband had put forward, she knew that it was up to her and her alone to decide the exact extent to which she could forgive him. We too have the power to assume the best of those who hurt us, and yet we also have the power to own when an act is not, or even not entirely, forgivable for us. Of course, all too often, even when we tell them in detail what they did wrong, why we are hurt, and what they can do to fix it, our wrongdoers will not apologize or right that wrong anytime soon, if not ever. Sometimes we would not welcome them the chance to communicate at all. We want nothing to do with them. Either their relationship is no longer consequential with us, to us, or they hurt us too much for us to be able to face them again. As restorative justice expert John Braithwaite writes, forgiveness is a gift. It loses its power as a gift if we make it a duty. When someone does not deserve our forgiveness, or even when we do not feel ready or safe yet to offer that forgiveness, we can certainly make the choice to withhold it, as long as we are capable of letting that hurt and anger inform and inspire rather than dominate and limit who we are and what we do. When we choose to forgive, it should not be because we are intimidated by the person or people asking, Rather, it should be because we respect them and their efforts enough to give them that key to tshuva, whether or not we continue our relationship with them as they walk that path. We may choose to forgive when we're ready to restore a relationship of mutual trust and respect, and we may also choose to forgive when we are ready to let go of that relationship and its hold on our attention. While it may not take anywhere near overnight, we can engage in the kind of self-reflection and self-care that leads to a day when we can let go of the boulder, when we can hand over the other person's key to the gates of repentance. We can decide that we have seethed enough and that we no longer need or want the responsibility to cultivate another person's righteousness. We can decide to learn from the suffering we did not deserve, to speak, write, donate, or volunteer. We can decide to let our reactions to comments we hear inform the way we speak about others, and we can strive to raise children with just some of the parenting values we wish ours had used with us. Even without a personal reason to forgive, we may engage in forgiveness in an effort to emulate our God. As the Talmud teaches, expanding upon words we sang during our Torah service today, and words that we repeat over and over next week, these are the ways of the Holy One. Gracious and compassionate, patient, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, assuring love for 1,000 generations, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, and granting pardon. Just as God is gracious and compassionate, the rabbis comment, you too must be gracious and compassionate. If we expect God to err on the side of forgiveness, even when we know we will not acknowledge and make reparations for everything we have done wrong in the past year, we must strive for the same mercy in our exchanges with friends and strangers alike. When we practice radical forgiveness, we contribute to a community that will forgive us when we too make mistakes, even at those times when we are too scared or embarrassed to apologize fully for them. Yes, our religious tradition emphasizes specific halachic requirements to whom we are required to forgive, and yet our liturgy asks our God and us to be liberal in the ways in which we exercise that forgiveness. While we may not always be able to forgive everyone who has wronged us face to face, either because of their will, our will, or simple practicality, our tradition provides us with a prayer to say with full intention each evening, to set that boulder to the side so that we can sleep unburdened. I hereby forgive anyone who has angered or provoked me or sinned against me, physically or financially, or by failing to give me due respect, or in any other manner relating to me, involuntarily or willingly, inadvertently or deliberately, whether in word or deed. Let no one incur punishment because of me. May we exercise our choice to forgive in ways that heal, instruct, bolster relationships, and encourage our lives of mitzvot and imitation of God. L'shana tova umtuka.